start the meeting, or you can call it.
Okay. Good evening, all.
Good evening.
Meeting number 2262 of Rotary Club Chandigarh Midtown is called to order. And I hand over the meeting to our president of the club's Rotarian, Sanjay Bhatia. Over to you, Sanjay ji.
Thank you very much, past President Arkaduta. And good evening to all. A warm welcome to our guest speaker for today, Dr. Rakesh Jaswal. And a few hands also present today. Good evening and welcome to all of you. I'll request Ann Nandita Sisodia to start the meeting with the invocation from her, please.
Thank you, Mr. Sanjay Bhatia. A very good evening, President Sanjay Bhatia, Secretary Shuchi Thakur, Rotarian Anupam Jain, Dr. Rakesh Jamwal, all Rotarians, Rotarians and guests. I'm going to tell you a very short motivational story. The story tells that two friends were walking through the desert. During some point of the journey, they had an argument. One friend slapped the other on his face. The other who got slapped was hurt. But without saying anything, he wrote on the sand, "Today my best friend slapped me in the face." They kept walking until they found an oasis, where they decided to take a bath. The one who had slapped got stuck in the mere and started drowning. But the friend saved him, and he recovered. After he recovered from the near drowning, he wrote on the stone, "Today my best friend saved my life." The friend who had slapped and saved his best friend asked him, "After I hurt you, you wrote in the sand, and now you write on a stone. Why?" The other friend replied, "When someone hurts you, we should write it down in sand, where winds of forgiveness can erase it away. But when someone does something good for us, we must engrave it in stone, where no wind can ever erase it." The moral of the story is, don't value the things you have in your life, but value who you have in your life. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandita ma'am. I remember a few months ago, we had the opportunity of having an invocation from you, and we had a very interesting story from you at that time also. It's always nice to hear good stories with good models from you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So this has been an eventful week in terms of events happening around us in the world. The vaccination program has started in India, and there have been posts on our group for Dr. Rita Karan, past and Dr. Vinita Gupta having taken the shots on the very first day itself. There is the 46th president in US, Joe Biden, who's assumed office, and going forward again in terms of the happenings around, there are big things happening. Everyone would be awaiting the budget also, which is being much publicized over the last few weeks, and which would be different to see, how the economy is going to take off and how the government is planning, what the roadmap is going forward. So the meeting last week was just a minute session we had, which was coordinated by past President Pradab. And during that meet, a lot of us realized, that we had to speak for a minute, and how difficult it is to contain ourselves within a minute, which most of us actually exceeding it or having to end abruptly. That set me thinking that, even when we start this meeting, I should be timing myself and not be taking too much time, so that we can do the other agenda on schedule. So with this, I would like to invite our Vocational Service Director, Anupam Jain, to kindly come take this meeting forward and introduce our guest speaker for today.
Thank you, President Sanjay Bhatia. Actually, I was just wondering if a doctor has joined us, because I have to introduce him, because
yes, he has.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Well, thank you, Rotary, for giving me this opportunity. My greetings to President Rotarian Sanjay Bhatia, Secretary Shuchi Thakur, and all fellow Rotarians. Very good evening to all of you. At Rotary, we are trying to put our minds and hack solutions to healthcare and other social issues by bringing best of brains online. So today's session is on Heart Special, and topic is prevention and treatment of heart disease. As we grow older, our heart changes with age. People at age 65 and older are much more likely than younger people to suffer a heart attack or to have a stroke or to develop coronary heart disease and heart failure. Heart disease is also a major cause of disability, limiting the activity and eroding the quality of life of millions of older people. Aging can cause changes in the heart and blood vessels. For example, as we get older, our heart cannot beat as fast during physical activity as it did when we were younger. I'm sure today's session will be relevant for many of us and informative for all of us. Here I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Rakesh Kumar Jaswal, Director, Fortis Hospital, Mohali. He is HOD Cardiology. It is indeed an immense pleasure to have Dr. Jaswal today for giving his views on important topic in our weekly meeting. He will enrich us with great learnings on prevention and treatment of heart diseases. Dr. Jaswal is an alumni of PGI Chandigarh, where he obtained DM Cardiology Super Specialty degree. Earlier, he completed his MBBS and MD degree courses at Government Medical College, Amritsar. He has post-DM experience at IGMC Shimla and AIIMS New Delhi. Dr. Jaswal has many research papers published in national and international journals of repute. He regularly participates in conferences in India and abroad as teaching faculty or in advisory capacity. He has over 25 years experience in the field of interventional cardiology. He has performed more than 40,000 cardiology procedures and more than 16,000 cardiac interventions, including complex and high-risk coronary interventions. He has the largest experience in entire North India of 36,000 transradial invasive procedures and 14,000 radial interventions, including complex transradial coronary interventions. Apart from procedural experience, he has been a part of teaching faculty of TRICO, TRTU, Asia Pacific, China, Japan, Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, etc. Over to you, Dr. Saab. It is a pleasure to have you here. If anyone has questions, can raise hands, or I would request all of you to post your questions on chat box so that we could take them one by one. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Saab.
Very good evening, everyone. On behalf of Fortis Mohali, I would just like to welcome each and everyone. We are sorry just for the delay. Dr. Saab is just coming in a few minutes.
Okay. Sorry.
Shuchi, is Dr. Rita also here?
I can't see Rita, ma'am.
Okay, I just thought we'd have some more details on tomorrow's project.
Yeah, tomorrow 2 Bollywood celebrities are coming. Isha Koraland. You can
I ask? So while we wait, I'll just request people, members to make some announcements. President Sanerji, would you like to make the announcement of the Bon Voyage for Sunday?
Yes, President, I had seen that you had posted the request in groups, we had thought of, that a good number of people can join us to go to Panipat on Sunday at 11 a.m., where we have to reach at 11, that we go and attend the bonvoyage program of our incoming DG, Ajay Madan. So two people have already given us their names, who will be accompanying. I would request more people in case they want to join us, they can. So far, we have confirmed, participation of President-elect, Secretary-elect, then Dr. Rita, Tulsi sir, Salil Bali, Pradeep Suryaji, and Deepak Sweet sir. Rest, I'm yet to have confirmation. I thought my president may have to more name in case he can add on. So far, we have about 6-7 people ready, which will be accompanying, which will be going for the worldwide program being hosted at Panipat. Over to the president.
Considering the situation right now, in case for the main 30 minutes or so, or 45 minutes, in case you want to try telecasting from there, we could just work it out. It's just an idea.
Okay.
Not at the cost of you missing anything. Definitely, you should not miss anything. But we could just give this a thought. Otherwise, pictures are always there, which would be captured by the team which is attending.
We'll look for that in case we can do the telecasting,
Hanji, I'm sure this would be outdoors, or you think this would be indoors?
No, it is outdoor.
Anupamji, is there some technical issue, or because there was a message for the Zoom link, right?
What message, Sanjay ji? What message you received?
This was on the group, that you send link of Zoom, or why you send link of Zoom. Dr. Purvansh karke hain.
No, I don't know him. Let me see. I don't know him.
Okay, I was just wondering whether someone assisting Dr. Jaswal.
No, nothing.
So, Joint Secretary Dr. Dua, Professor Dr. Dua, is he there?
Yes, he is there.
Can you just unmute him while we wait for the Dr. Jaswal?
I've requested him.
Yes.
Dr. Dua, why don't you talk of the Australia-India last test match? I know you're a big cricket fan, not just for the IPL, I'm sure, let's talk of some good things. That was quite historic. Did you watch the match? And,
Yes,
just...
I watched the full match.
Yeah.
That was summed up by the Secretary Australian team also. They said India is too a great country. It has, 3 billion people, and out of that, if 11 comes to fight, they can fight anyone in the world. You be careful always. Don't write off India. That's wonderful. And the way in which these people have been greeted is just unimaginable. Shiraj, stayed to his place. His father was buried on 20th of December, and just paid the homage. And he was the person who, when he got the cap, kept crying and remembering and paying homage to his father.
Yes.
At the time when the match was to start and when he was camped. That was too good. And look at the way in which Washington Sundar was greeted with the folk dance and the local dance at his place. It was unimaginable. That was too good. And that showed the homage paid by his father to somebody who was his neighbor, whose name was Washington, who helped him during the difficult time to finance and fund him for the cricket. And he said, my second son will be named after you. And he was named as Washington Sundar.
Wow.
He just followed his father's profession and showed. And by the way, Washington Sundar is the opener for the South Zone. and which his highest score was 146. But the man who has been opener, coming at 7th number and then scoring and putting India out of that one, I salute to such a boy, such a boy. They show that, you know, the grit, the determination which the newcomers have. I think that India has a very good future so far as cricket is concerned. Excellent. Excellent.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Good evening, ma'am. So, ma'am, Dr. Jaswal has arrived, and there's somebody who's annotating the screen. So, can you ask somebody not to annotate the screen? And Dr. Jaswal has arrived now.
I think if you put on the presentation, should be taken care of.
And if 1 minute I may add, I cannot forget the contribution of our neighbor Gill. You see, he left Sangrur to take a house, small house, as a rented accommodation next to the Sector 6 Mohalli cricket stadium, paid their, you know, 13,000 rupees rent for 3 years so that he can be in the ground in the morning at 5 a.m. in the morning. And he played like anything. Such a
So, has Dr. Sab arrived in the meeting?
Yes, yes.
We see the screen right now. Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. So, welcome, Dr. Jaswal, today for giving views on important topic in our weekly meeting.
Is this happening from your computer, Dr. Jaswal?
No, 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 not from my end. That's what we were trying to settle down, you know.
But it is coming mentioned as Fortis Hospital also.
Ma'am, actually, somebody is annotating it.
There is some problem on the screen. Some scratches are coming. Please take care of that.
Disable the. Yeah, disable. And this.
This was there when Dr. Dua was speaking, and it is now also coming there. Now I think it's better.
Disable D and
It's fine now.
okay now.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask the participants as to which language they want me to speak, Hindi, Punjabi, or English.
English should be okay, Doctor.
English is better.
Okay, fine, fine. Makes sense. I am comfortable with every language. No problems. Yeah.
That speaks of your polyglot nature.
So, in today's time, when we are talking about the quality of treatment, now we definitely want that people of our country, they should get the best of coronary interventions. So the topic is today, you deserve the best intervention for your best outcomes. And how can you achieve it? By utilizing advanced therapy options to perform precise angioplasty. And this is a paradigm shift. What we mean by paradigm shift here is that, you know, I'm into interventions right from the first batch of PJ in 1994, when the intervention started anywhere in the world. And we have seen it evolving over a period of time. So initially, you know, we were satisfied by being able to deploy a stent and get out of the cath lab. But it was realized that the immediate and long-term results of PI or percutaneous coronary intervention by deploying a stent in the major artery, which is creating problem, are determined by the precision with which you have done it, how well have you expanded it, and how well have you prepared the bed to deploy the stent. So over a period of time, several developments have happened, which I'm going to discuss today, which can treat the calcified disease in the coronaries. You must have heard so many times that patient was taken up for angioplasty and then he had a problem on table, then he crashed, then emergency surgery was required. Let me tell you today, if we use all the gadgets which are available today on shelf with the top cardiologists in the world, there is no reason why there should be any problem in on table or in hospitalization period or even later on if you have done a precise work on table. Now, there are 4 or 5 developments which have happened in the last 20 years. These are, development of rotablation, which handles the calcium, because we all know that about 15 to 20% arteries in Indians have significant amount of calcium. And if we do not treat that, deploy the stent, it remains underdeployed and leads to major complications either on table or maybe within 24 to 48 hours of admission. And definitely these stents do not work for long, and they bring a bad name to the interventional cardiology itself. Similarly, now we have such precision that we can deploy the stent and then make 3D high resolution optical coherence tomographic images and see thread by thread as to how well the stent has expanded. And not only that, you must have heard so many times, that one doctor is saying this artery requires a stent, the other doctor says that it can be managed with medicine. So the patient is totally confused. That era is also now gone. We have the technology, which is what is called as FFR, or fractional flow reserve, with which you can say with 100% certainty that yes, if I deploy a stent in this artery, irrespective of what is looking on angiogram, this will definitely save life. And if, on the other hand, FFR says that even though the artery is looking very critically diseased or occluded on angiogram, but FFR shows that actually it's not causing significant obstruction, then if you leave that artery as such on medical treatment, the patient does as well as he would have done with stent. Rather, I would say that stent doesn't offer any benefit to that patient, rather it can harm. And the basic purpose of treatment today, or basic of the Hippocrates oath, is do no harm. So if we want to do something which is precise, so we have to utilize the latest technology. Why I chose this topic, because over years, after we have got all this equipment and precision PCI parameters which we have fixed up for us, we have got it in place for the last more than a decade. I've realized that the kind of people now who are coming to us are absolutely different. Those who are aware that, okay, fine, this is what happens in US, this is what happens in Europe, and this is what is available to me at a cost which is 1/20th of what is being charged in those countries. And a layman would always say, give me the least price, because they would feel that every procedure is the same, whether it is done with precision or just bluntly done. So purpose is, if I am given a chance, I would never go to a cath lab where all this equipment to save life is not there, because you may need it in good 20% of the cases only, but when you need it there and then, right on the spot itself. So all this equipment, which is worth crores, should be available all the time in the hospital. And we have, first we will talk about the rotational atherectomy. It's a kind of, diamond-studded bird which rotates at 1,40,000 RPM to 2,20,000 RPM. It chisels the calcium, makes it soft, then you dilate it with the balloon, and then you deploy the stent and nothing happens to that stent. If you do it without treating the calcium, this doesn't expand, stent doesn't expand, and it leads to problems sometimes on table, including, the risk of perforation on table. And if perforation is there, you lose the patient there and then itself. So we have been certified by Boston Scientific, which is the #1 company in the world for supplying and manufacturing rotablation for last 20 years. So they have made me the proctor for teaching cardiologists this technique, and our hospital has been declared as the Center of Excellence for Rotational Atherectomy. Beyond that, today now, why I had to postpone the things by about 15 minutes. I straight away come from the hospital because we were stuck up with a situation where even rotational atherectomy was not able to handle the calcium. It was not relenting even with that. And that too in a relatively young lady, about 55 years old. So we had to resort to even more advanced intravascular lithotripsy, which delivers, the ultrasonic waves into the calcium, cracks it into pieces, and then you soften it, and then you deploy a stent there. So why I chose this topic for a very simple reason, because knowing scientific reality, God forbidding, as I said, if I ever need a coronary stenting, I would definitely go only to a center where all these options are available, because doing interventions day in and day night, day out, we know that how commonly you are stuck up, and sometimes you do suboptimal stent procedure because you didn't have the required equipment. And as I said earlier also, as per Hippocrates' oath and medical ethics, do no harm should be my principle. And if I don't have to harm my patients, then I must have all this technology available as and when it is required in about 50% of the cases. It offers cost benefit also. In countries like Japan, medical reimbursement is allowed only for those patients who go FFR guided PCI, which means that, before stenting a artery, you must document that, yes, even at rest, the flow through this artery is less. And only then you stent it, because even though the cost of FFR is added, but unnecessary stents lead to much higher cost for the government, which is reimbursing everything to these patients. So they have made it mandatory that, without FFR, PCI will not be acceptable, because you can make a lot of mistakes without doing FFR. And this is known to decrease the number of stenting procedures by 43% and bypass surgery by 53%. And many times, instead of multiple vessel stenting, you'll end up with just one stent, because your FFR says that one stent is good enough, and you don't need to do unnecessary stenting in these patients just based upon the angiographic findings. Clinical trials, as far as rotablation is concerned, have shown that if you do rotablation in a routine case, then it doesn't help. But wherever there is calcium, then rotational atherectomy has beneficial role in circumstances where the calcified disease is there, and this calcium is either not being crossed adequately with balloon, or it is not getting dilated with the angioplasty balloon. So whenever there is a diffuse calcified disease, the only option in that case, if you do not have the equipment, is to do the bypass surgery. As you know, bypass surgery has good 6-7% mortality also, and a thing which can be easily treated at a very low risk by the advanced therapy option. I feel a lot of pain when such patients are referred by the cardiologist for surgery, because they do not have any idea about these technologies. And I must confidently tell you that not even 1% of the operators in our country are utilizing all this equipment, which gives me a lot of pain. So in such clinical circumstances, these devices are the only way out to complete the procedure, or you let 1 to 3% mortality happen on table, which is too high. And now you know that the calcium is more in diabetic patients. In India, the number of diabetic patients is very high. In fact, India is called the diabetic capital of the world. And this leads to kidney disease. Kidney patients and diabetic patients have very high level of calcium in the arteries. So to take them on table without preparation can be risky. So I will internationally, it has been strongly advocated that we must have centers of excellence for international management of calcified disease. It serves two purposes. One is to give patients a good service, and second is to teach other doctors about this technology, so that the advanced therapy reaches gradually over a period of time into every hospital. With that intent, the Boston Scientific has made us the center of excellence for rotablation therapy for the North India. So with the time, when we started doing it about 20 years ago, there was about 15% risk with it. And now it is close to 1%, as good as a normal angioplasty, right? So things have really changed. So I'll just show you few interesting cases. There are situations where medical science tends to fail. That's where the advanced technology takes over. Mr. NSJ, he's 83 years old. I did an angiogram on him 3 years ago. He had bad calcified disease. That time we advised him bypass surgery. Surgeon found that patient to be very high risk of stroke and mortality, so they declined surgery. He went back home, never got in touch with me again, remained on medicines. And then this year, very few days ago, he had problem. He was a long-standing diabetic with hypertension, thyroid, multiple myeloma. He had COVID also. This COVID triggered heart attack, and now he was having heart attack and was critical with that heart attack, and the surgery in any case was not an option for him because it has already been declined. And then what you do, that is the time when I'll skip some of the technical slides, but I'll show you how it helps, and this is the kind of arteries, excess root arteries which were there. So all, old age related tortuous artery, and the entire thing was calcified. Surgery is not an option. So what we did was, this is how rotablation burr goes in. It is getting stuck in the calcium. Then third run, it's a kind of, diamond studded burr, like a drill, which creates a space inside the artery after pulverizing the calcium, right? So, and after that, we could dilate it with the balloon and stent, and quickly in 10 minutes, this is how the artery looks. Absolutely normal. He was discharged despite being on ventilator, and a lot of assistance was required. This was done on 8th December, and the latest follow-up 3 days ago showed that his heart was near normal now, and is about to fly to UK as and when the flights are allowed, because his family is in UK. So, and now we will talk. I'll give you a brief idea about what are the FFR and OCT in coronary artery disease I was talking about. Wherever it is needed, it is probably the only thing which saves the day for you. Why? Because it is said that you must see by FFR and then complete all the blockages. And if without doing that, if FFR, there is a critical cutoff value, if it is greater than 80, then there is no point in stenting that artery, even if it looks very bad on angiogram, because in that case, you do not offer him any advantage by opening that artery, but at the same time, you accept the stent related complications. So this is one trial, latest trial, which has shown that if you do without stenting, the incidence of complications is very high. And if you do with FFR, it is as good as medical management complication rate, but the benefit is really great. And another thing is that if you use FFR, then the number of stents are decreased by 43%, as is clear from these bars. So if 100 patients on angiography are assessed or found to be requiring a stent, when you do FFR, only 57 would need it, 43 would be good enough for medical management. So it saves a lot of discomfort to the patient, unnecessary complications, and it takes off a lot of load from the medical profession. That unnecessary work is removed. So I'll not go into the details of the technical slides, So what are the benefits of FFR? It helps in avoiding the unnecessary stenting. It precisely guides us to perform PCI and stenting only in those coronary blockages which would lead to definite clinical benefits, which includes survival benefit to the patient. And this is invaluable tool in this era of evidence-based angioplasty and stenting. So very likely a very good example, this patient, he came to us with a heart attack involving this artery, but this is another artery which was calcified, and on angiography it appeared 80% blocked. So initial planning was, without FFR, the planning was that you fix this artery, then you do rotablation to the other artery which is calcified bad, and then you deploy 2 stents there. But this is the FFR wire. When FFR was done, it showed that the LAD doesn't need any treatment. So just 1 stent, and this is 5 years old procedure. And instead of putting 3 stents, we could get away with only 1 stent. And this was the FFR value, which is as good as a normal artery. Well, the angiography was showing that it is a critically blocked artery. Another patient, doctor's father from US. So he was elderly, high risk for surgery, 82 years. And he had a word with me on phone, and he requested me that don't send him for bypass, he'll have very bad outcome. So you do rotablation to all the 3 vessels. So I did it and fixed it. And when we did the last vessel fixing, we realized that part of this vessel was probably pinched. So now the thing is, we put another stent here, or we leave it on medical management, and we did the FFR, which is as good as normal. We left it as such. 3 years, nothing has happened to this patient. He's doing perfectly fine. So that is the strength of today's advanced technique. So I'll not go into the technical details, but these are the trials. Now the third thing which I'm talking about is the optical coherence tomography, or OCT. And this is what it shows, that in the presence of heart attack, if we do a life-saving angioplasty with OCT, then the complication rates is 7.7%. If we do it without it, then it is more than double, 15.7%. So even during heart attack, if you do OCT, benefits are enormous. And I'll show you some pictures. A very senior, a very well-known lawyer, young, had MI, heart attack, and when we did the OCT, his artery was totally ruptured at one place, which we picked up. This is how it, this is where it is torn. This is what was causing heart attack. Just a small stent there, and he did pretty well. This is how OCT looks. Each and every part of the stent is precisely seen after we deploy it. It shows precisely well. On 3D, you can see, how the stent has been. Each and every microscopic, strut is clearly visible, and you know that it is so precise in such a situation. And if there is anything left, then you correct it before you leave the table. So you are sure that at night I won't get any call for any problem in this patient. This is how it improves the outcome in a patient. So if the opening is not correct, then definitely it's going to cause problem. Another patient, a doctor himself, one of my seniors, he was 3-4 years senior to me in medical college. He had a massive heart attack, calcified artery. We fixed up everything, and after we finished, we realized that there is an area which is looking suspicious. So we overdilated that area, but still it was looking bad. So we were not sure, because this is the artery on which he was surviving. So we didn't want to take any chances. And when we did the OCT, we realized that at one place the calcium had punctured the stent. So if we do not see it and leave it, at night he would have problem. So this is how it, this is where it is fractured, right? So we sealed that fracture, and then again did the OCT. A perfect result we got. This is 3 years old story. The guy is doing absolutely fine, and this is the area where it was fractured. It has been repaired and doing perfectly fine. So another 90 years old male, one of my younger colleagues' father, heart attack at 90 with bad calcium. So we did the rotablation. And since this was the major artery, so we, after rotablation, fixed it with a stent. And then we did a OCT run to see how it looks from inside, since it was perfect. So this is how the entire calcium is out, well expanded stent. And this was again 2.5 years ago. Doing perfectly fine. So you are sure on table, even if patient or anybody says that there is any risk, you can confidently tell them that after these images, there is nothing to worry about. So this was the latest, developments which have happened during the last, say, 20 years to treat heart disease. So treatment is as important as is prevention. So let's talk a bit about how to treat, because without prevention and without lifestyle modification, even after you have got the treatment, if the causative factors are not improved, then definitely the patient is going to have problem time and again, recurrent problem, and the purpose will be defeated. So heart disease among Indians, this is a preventable epidemic. Why I say it epidemic? Because if you look at the figures in 1960, 4% of adult population has heart disease. 2001 census showed it is close to 11%. And if you look at more recent 2011 census, nearly 14% of adults in India have heart disease. The most depressing part is that in India, 35% of all deaths are due to heart attacks, while in advanced countries like America, only 12% of deaths are due to heart attacks. And China, I have observed very closely. I've been going there as faculty for so many years. They have made a phenomenal progress in treatment of heart disease, and their mortality, which was 30 years ago as bad as we Indians, has dropped down to 20% due to heart attacks. So, putting everything together, about 10% of adult population, 6 crore patients of heart attack are there in our country, and about 15 to 16 lakh people, they die every year due to heart attack. 91 persons, they die in India every hour with heart attack. And it was shown that by 2010, India had the maximum cases of heart disease compared to any other region in the world. So it is so bad. How Indian heart disease is different from Western heart disease? Indians suffer heart attack about 10 years earlier. It is genetic difference. We are more prone to early coronary artery disease or premature coronary artery disease. In Western countries, it is said that if heart attack occurs before the age of 40, then revise your diagnosis, because the chances of heart attack below the age of 40 years is very, very, very rare, right? But among Indians, about 25% of the heart attack patients are below the age of 40. Again, it is said that heart attack is very rare between 40 and 55 years. The actual disease starts after 55 in Western countries. But among Indians, nearly 2/3 of the patients who have suffered heart attack, they are below the age of 55. Another difference is among Indians, the disease is mostly very extensive, rapidly progressive, and most of the times you get triple vessel disease. All the 3 vessels are diseased when we do the angiogram. Needless to say, if the same quality of treatment is offered to Indians, compared to their Western counterparts, the mortality with heart attack, despite the best of treatment, is 2 to 3 times higher compared to the Western population. These are the 4 different major problems which or lifestyle errors which we do, which leads to high risk of heart disease among us. You know, diabetes, hypertension, heart attack, stroke, these are all diseases of unhealthy lifestyle. So if we make our lifestyle healthy, so definitely these diseases will not occur. One of the commonest problems with we Indians is our routine diet is rich in fats and salt. It is low in fiber. And now newer generation is taking a lot of junk and fast food, and that causes a lot of harm. We'll discuss how does it do it. The 4th major dietary problem with we Indians is the consumption of dairy products. I'll tell you a very interesting fact that in Western countries it was found that the risk of heart disease among non-vegetarians were much higher compared to the vegetarians. So in those countries the recommendation was that if you want to decrease the risk of heart attack, switch over to the vegetarian diet. But when the similar observation was made in among Indian patients, it was found that among Indians the risk is as much among vegetarians as is among the non-vegetarians. And it was found that the reason behind that was that the vegetarians in India, they consume a lot of dairy products, assuming that whatever weakness happens because of non-consumption of meat and allied products can only be compensated by makhan, ghee, and such dairy products. And if you look at the buffalo milk, it has about 11% saturated fat, which is as bad as red meat. So they end up having the same kind of risk as the people who take non-vegetarian food. So this was called by WHO as the pseudo-vegetarianism of Indians. The second is the lack of exercise. Exercise level is really too bad in our country. And in sitting in Punjab, you might feel that tobacco is not an issue, but if you look at the entire country, about 40 to 60% of the men and about 25% of the women, they consume tobacco in some form or the other. And 4th part is the psychosocial stress. Worst enemy is the central obesity, which we Southeast Asians have a huge tendency towards, caused by 2 things. One is the environmental factor and the genetics. Genetics we cannot change, and the environmental factor is the unhealthy lifestyle. It leads to blood pressure, it leads to cholesterol high, it leads to thick blood and clotting issues. It leads to glucose intolerance and diabetes. So all these things put together lead to 2 to 3% times higher risk of heart disease and diabetes. And how common is it? About 40% of people above the age of 40 years have metabolic syndrome. How do we define it? For central obesity, for men, Asian men, any circumference at the level of waist circumference at the level of umbilicus, if it is more than 36 inches, or for women more than 32 inches, the major criteria for the diagnosis of metabolic syndrome or central obesity is met. With this, 2 of the 4, borderline blood pressure, borderline sugar high, borderline cholesterol, good cholesterol which is low, or triglyceride with bad cholesterol which is little high. 2 of these plus the major criteria gives you the diagnosis of metabolic syndrome. So straight away, 40% of the adults above the age of 40 years in our country, they have 2 to 3 times higher risk of diabetes and coronary artery disease. That is the reason why India is called the diabetic and the cardiac capital of the world. Maximum cases of these 2 diseases in our country. What can we do to prevent it? 4 things: regular exercise, about 45 minutes. I'll explain to you what kind of exercise helps. Maintain healthy food habits, stress management, and stop tobacco consumption in any form. And these 4 things They are simple, affordable, and effective. Now, exercise, minimum of 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise, preferably 45 minutes a day in one go, 5 to 7 days a week, preferably every day. And which are good exercises? For heart, isotonic exercises, which means brisk, walking, cycling, treadmill, and they should be done in 3 phases. Warm up 5 to 10 minutes, walk at your normal casual pace, warm up your body, and then try to walk as brisk as possible without torturing yourself, which is called the maintenance phase for about half an hour. And then again, 5 to 7 minutes, slow down, what is called as the cool down stage. And then you can sit on the chair. Not to just, after jogging, don't sit on the chair straight away, because that has its own problems of increased risk of cardiac arrest. And in our day-to-day activity, we have to incorporate physical activity. Like, I work in a multi-storied building, so from one floor to other, I never take lift. I would always prefer to climb the stairs. But definitely, if you have major risk factors for coronary artery disease, or you are an established patient of heart disease, then TMT should be done to establish the safety of this level of physical activity. And if TMT is normal, then you can safely do it. If we walk 5 kilometers in hour, we burn about 300 calories. We'll utilize this equation little later. And needless to say that tobacco, whether we chew tobacco or people smoke BD, cigar, everything is very bad for heart. In fact, for every system, but for heart, it is poison. Obesity, it was found that in elderly and in children, the commonest cause of obesity was fast food and eating more, sitting idle, watching television more often, and playing video games. So it was suggested in America that if you need to lose weight, you need to lose 20 cable channels, meaning indirectly that TV viewing and sedentary work has to be avoided as far as possible. Dietary management. Now we just discussed that if you walk 5 kilometers in 1 hour, you burn 300 calories. If after coming back you take one scoop of ice cream, that could be costing you about 400 calories. So all the hard work done in 1 hour would go down the drain. Similarly, one good size samosa will mean 450 calories. So even if we do regular exercise, unless we manage our diet, things are not going to work out. Worst enemies are Coca-Colaization and McDonaldization of modern society, fast food and cola drinks. There's a lot of television advertising, which is leading one to accept more and more of this kind of food. Children are attracted to take this kind of food, and there is tendency towards more eating out. Very few people now take good quality food at home. That is also harming us. And it is convenient. If you don't want to cook at home, just go anywhere, take food. But I can guarantee you that the kind of fat you consume with this kind of one meal is more than what you consume in the entire week at your home. So you have to watch, that say if you take once in a month, okay, fine, still it is tolerable. But if you take it too frequently, this is going to cause a lot of harm. Another problem is, our taste buds dictate us how much to eat. And because this food is tasty, so we end up taking more. Similarly, there are a lot of schemes which come with that with one burger small, you get one big, with big burger, you get one free. So in that, for that, reason, we end up taking 2 burgers instead of 1. And soft drink is usually an accompaniment, which is unnecessary calories, because about 300 ml of Coca-Cola gives you about 250 calories, which is unnecessary, right? So this kind of food should be avoided as far as possible. Similarly, during your fat intake, you should be aware that there are bad fats which have to be avoided, and there are good fats which can be used in small quantity to fulfill your body needs of fats for myelinization of your nerves and other reasons, right? So saturated fat should be avoided at all costs, which means red meats, dairy products, coconut oil, palm oil. These four are the source of saturated fats, and they should be avoided as far as possible. Monounsaturated fatty acids are good fats. You get it from olive oil, from peanuts, from nuts, cereals, and white meats. Trans fatty acids you get from dalda ghee, margarine, fast foods, cookies, chips, cakes, and anything which is deep fried has very high concentration of trans fatty acids. PUFA, polyunsaturated fatty acids, they are again good fats, which you get from sunflower oil, soybean oil, saffron, kardika tel, corn, and walnut. So MUFA and PUFA you can take, avoid trans fatty acids and saturated fatty acids as far as possible. Soya bean, very good for heart. Phytochemicals, that is garlic, is again good for heart. And in Indian patient, at least alcohol is not good for heart. Trans fatty acids, when you do this kind of deep frying, all the fats, even if you do it in olive oil, deep frying, it gets converted into trans fatty acids. You reuse this oil for deep frying, again, the concentration of fatty acids goes on increasing every time. So preferably avoid deep fried articles. And if you ever have to take, just use the oil once and throw it. So these are the good cooking oils: olive oil, but again, you know, not for deep frying purposes, peanut oil, mustard oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, and kardika tel. These 6. And if we look here, some have more PUFA, some have more MUFA. You need both of them in equal amount. So go on changing these oils from time to time. All these 6 have to be taken on a rotational basis, or you can mix 2 or 3 oils at one time. That's how it has to be used. But in any case, avoid saturated fats, which is butter, ghee, coconut, palm, because this has 69% saturated fats, which can cause harm to the heart. Similarly, fresh fruits and vegetables, if you take 2 to 3 servings a day, it reduces heart attack by about 25 to 30%, which is pretty high. Multicolored fruits, very old saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. And the total amount of food that we take, we you know, get disease because we, across the globe, we tend to overeat. I went to Egypt once, and this is a beautiful wording which I picked up from one of the tombs. 1/4 of what you eat keeps you alive. The other 3/4 keeps your doctor alive. So whatever excess calories we take, that's what is causing all the trouble. Nuts are considered to be a tastier way to a healthy heart, but only precaution to be taken is maximum of 20 to 40 grams a day, because this provides you good cholesterol, it provides you mineral, it provides you protein, it provides you MUFA, vitamins, iron, calcium, and fiber. So it's a complete food. Similarly, exercise, we have already discussed. I was talking about India consuming a lot of dairy products. So this is a chart of comparison. Japan, very little milk is being used, over 5 to 6 liters per person per year. Very high activity level, and Japanese have the longest lifespan in the world. US, Europe, white races, about 200 liters per year. Moderate level of activity, average life is 79 to 80 years. Among Indians, the milk consumption is about 300 liters per person per year, because this includes not only the milk, but it also includes the milk products and sweets made of milk. Activity level is plus minus, more minus than plus, and life expectancy is 64 years. So, but I'm not trying to convey that you should not take milk at all. All vegetarians, they can consume about ½ liter of, skimmed milk in 24 hours, whatever way they want to use it. Anything more than this, might cause harm. So we have discussed dietary management, lipid management, exercise, and let's talk a bit about stress management. People in our country are born with stress, right from birth. They're worried about their career. Bhagavad Gita says that he who on this earth can withstand the storm of desire and anger, he's a yogi, he's a happy man. Because every stress arises from anger and desire, gussa and ichha. If we can control it, as much as possible, the stress starts going down. These are the three things in one's nature which makes him more prone to heart disease. One is the hostility. Those who get irritated and they get angry very soon, they have highest risk of coronary artery disease. There was a beautiful scientific study which mentioned that if you are standing on a traffic light, the moment it turns green, the person who honks the first horn, he has the highest chance of developing a heart attack because he is so restless that he cannot wait for people standing in front of him to move on. Second is the type A stress. Type A is a kind of personality, before 1985, there was no available treatment for heart attack anywhere in the world. So a lot of research was done in the personality typing and how to modify it and how to decrease the risk. So type A personalities are intelligent people, they are successful people, they're hardworking. They, in fact, try to, outperform themselves. In less time, they want to do more. They're very successful, but they have relatively high risk of heart disease. But at the same time, changing personality altogether is sometimes harmful because at that time, in a country like India, where, jobs are not available, changing, profession or personality type is not an option. But in America, it was tried that, okay, fine, a person type A suffers heart attack. On medical grounds, he was given less stressful job and a relatively retired life. Then the people who were forced to change their lifestyle 10 years down the line had higher incidence of heart attack than the people who refused to change their lifestyle. The reason found was that a person who has been performer throughout his life, the stress of non-performance in him sometimes can be more stressful than the stress of performance. So little modification in lifestyle, but drastic changes in lifestyle is something which has to be avoided. And people who do not talk to anyone, remain isolated, they have much higher stress level and much more prone to heart disease. So caring for each other, sharing your views and stresses with your spouse or friends or family members is something which is very important. This is called neoprofile. So these are the three things which have to be controlled to reduce the risk of heart attack. Work stress is another factor these days. It has been found that people who are working under high pressure jobs, where the work demand is very high and the job is insecure, that the moment you perform less, you may be out of job. This kind of work pressure in Finland over 25 years led to the risk of heart attack, which was as much as in a patient who had two major risk factors for heart disease, like he was a smoker and a sedentary lifestyle. So that's the kind of work stress which it is as harmful as two major risk factors. So these are the issues in India now: lack of social support, nuclear families, type A personality, job stress, low level of job control, anger, hostility, rage, depression incidence is increasing among urban population, difficult to aspirational life, more aspiration, less means, and lack of religious affiliation. So these are the four ways to reduce stress. Regular exercise leads to endorphins in our brain, and they decrease our level of stress. Yoga, meditation, lot of literature in this direction, not only internationally, but also in our country. Also, Dr. Manchanda from AIIMS has conducted several trials on yoga, meditation, on devotional music, on classical music, and he has studied, the hormonal changes in our body, the blood pressure changes, the stress hormone levels in our body, and it has been found that definitely all these things, they lead to much lower level of stress and associated lifestyle diseases. Personal communication, yes, very, very important, and laughter is another thing which helps. Prayer, when you concentrate here in the frontal area and indulge in prayer for about 15-20 minutes, it has a definite beneficial effect, because this is the place which releases the stress busters. They're released, and meditation leads to much higher level of stress busters in your blood circulation compared to the people who do not pray at all. And yoga, I'll just cut short. We have already taken a lot of time. So these are the definite advantages of yoga, and at least one asana, Shavasana, has proven that it significantly reduces the risk of heart attacks. And these are the other diseases like blood pressure, coronary artery disease, diabetes, asthma, migraine, irritable bowel syndrome, and psychoneurotic disorders, and probably cancer, in which the yoga can be helpful. So at the end, among the prevention, heart disease is a disease of choice, and we ourselves choose this disease for ourselves, for us, by taking to unhealthy lifestyle. Right? The incidence of metabolic syndrome is rising, and keeping a watch on our tummy and overall weight is most important to prevent heart disease. Diabetes, hypertension, lipid disorder, and smoking are the most common preventable risk factors. The earlier we avoid them or treat them, the less is the risk of heart attack. Lifestyle modification is the key to success. Regular exercise, avoid servant culture, remain active the entire day, and eat healthy food. That's the way ahead. Stress management by avoiding isolation, gussa, and type A stress as much as possible. And if we do everything, we can definitely delay the onset and the severity of disease, and we can have a better quality and quantity of life. Thank you very much. So we can take up some questions and discuss.
Wonderful, Dr. Saab. Thank you very much for very informative and illustrious session, especially knowledge you imparted us. You have covered each and every aspect, from diet to yoga to prayers to relationship to de-stressing yourself, everything. So now I would like if our audience can ask any question if they have. So Dr. Saab, I ask you a question.
Yeah.
A very simple question, that sometimes we just say that that person was eating healthy, exercising regularly, he was maintaining weight also, he was managing stress also, तो पता नहीं एकदम से क्या हुआ और उसको cardiac arrest हो गया. So Dr. Saab, how do we know that we have a bad heart? People say that नहीं अंदर कुछ ना कुछ होता रहता है और पता नहीं चलता, kind of, So how do we know that we have a bad heart?
Very important question. Very, very important question. In fact, there are angiographic trials which have shown that 86% of the patients who suffer heart attack have no symptom whatsoever prior to their heart attack. And the first index presentation can be heart attack. Okay? So for this, regular checkup, including the preventive heart checkups, and nowadays even a CT angiogram, or if on stress test you find any changes, even though you do not have any symptoms, then to take an angiogram to have a real inside picture of what's happening. So this is very important. Proactively, we have to, dig out the disease and then correct it. But even in patients who suffer heart attack, it is important to say that if they are maintaining healthy lifestyle, then their chances of dying from that heart attack are minimum. They normally tolerate the heart attack well. They give us time to treat, and most of these people, they're pretty well. And most of the time, what we find is a single artery which is blocked. So, genetics aside, other risk factors aside, if the patient's lifestyle is healthy, then the chances of that person dying due to heart attack or being able to tolerate the treatment of heart attack, the chances of dying is very low, and the treatment is very well tolerated in this patient because the training of the heart is there.
Sir, may I ask a question?
Yes, sure.
Sir, how do they detect the microvascular angina? Means the angiographs can only show the blockade in the major arteries, coronary arteries, but how about the microvascular angina?
See, as far as microvascular angina is concerned, you cannot see the small vessels.
Sure.
So if the epicardial vessels are all fine, heart muscle structure is all fine, and patient is having angina, then there is no other way that it can happen. It's only the microvasculature which is not adequately dilating at the time of exercise. Normally what happens is, at the time of exertion, the heart's requirement of blood is increased, right? So the microcirculation, local hormones cause dilatation of the microcirculation, and it allows more blood flow to the muscle mass. Some people have defective microvasculature, particularly with age sometimes, and in women due to hormones, and third cause most of the times is the diabetes. In these three categories of patients, microcirculation.
How to handle them?
There are medicines which can improve the microcirculation.
Right, sir.
Like Nicorandil, like Diltiazem. So they have to be, drugs have to be optimized, and the patient has to be assured that microvascular angina can affect the quality of life, but it will never kill a person. So there is no effect on the longevity of life due to microvascular. So once assurance is there, stress level decreases, because stress also further increases the microvascular insufficiency.
Thank you very much.
So, yeah, so that way, by adequate counseling and medications, you can treat it.
So I'm seeing Rotarian Professor Dua wants to ask question. Please, Dr. Dua.
Thank you very much, Madam Jan. Dr. Jaswal.
Yes, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
What a wonderful development of technology which you have shown. Excellent. Right. Hats off to such a technological development. I have a different query,
right,
which is very important and going to be important in the next fortnight or so, that most of the people as a preventive measure, they are given aspirin 75 milligram to the heart, whether they are having heart patient or they are not. Now it comes in the category of blood thinners. Okay. And one of the recommendations for vaccination is that the patient and the person to be vaccinated should not be on a blood thinner. What is your personal opinion with regard to the aspirin 75 milligram taken every day, which is about 3 crores of Indian population is on that? That's one question.
Good question. See, this is a common question being asked to us these days, because most of our cardiac patients in particular, they are on even 2 blood thinners, aspirin and clopidogrel. Most of them are on DAPT, dual antiplatelet therapy. So it is always better, if you avoid, antiplatelet drugs for about 24 to 48 hours before intramuscular injection.
Okay.
The real harm in intramuscular injection is done if the patient is on anticoagulants. In that case, you have to stop it for about 5 days. But even with antiplatelets, it's better to miss at least 1 day's dose, 24 hours, because what happens is, when we stop the antiplatelet drugs, 10 to 20% of the platelets, which are generated by the body in next 24 hours,
reduced.
that is good enough to stop the bleeding. So the correction is quite quick. So that's how we look at it, that if it is mandatory. So because vaccination is being done in a planned manner. So you know that, okay, fine, I'm getting my turn day after tomorrow. So just miss for 24 to 48 hours, and that serves the purpose. Those people who are on anticoagulation, they have to be more careful because they might land up with hematomas in their muscles.
No, next,
Right.
Madam, then
There is another call for question from our past district governor, Rotarian Shaju Peterji. Please.
Dr. Jaswal, the only cooking medium that the Keralites use day in and day out is coconut oil. They don't know any other oil for cooking. I am not aware of any statistically significant incidence of heart disease among Keralites.
Yes, very nice question. In fact, I forgot to tell that we always believe that Punjab and Haryana, they have the highest incidence of coronary artery disease in India. But if you look at the prevalence rates, the highest prevalence rate is among Keralites, and the reason for that is coconut.
Okay.
Ahead of us, yes.
I was not aware of that, really.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
So now our President-elect Rotarian Salil Chopra wants to have ask a question. Please, Salil sir. Is Salil sir there? Hello.
I'm here. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Clearly. Absolutely.
Dr. Jaswal, I was just going through the slides which were trying to share with us, and I saw there's a lot of incidence of CAD as related to sugar or diabetic or as well as hypertension. My question is, Doc, I'm also a patient of diabetes, though at a border level, but it keeps varying, from 100 to 120 to 130. I'm talking the fasting one. But everybody talks to me, suddenly it's a normal, from 100 to 130 to 140, you take it normal. It's all the reading which is varying from state to state, doctor to doctor, or even the country to country. And this is the moderate ratio is about less than 150, should be taken as not a problem. So I just want to be doubly sure from you, what should be the reading, or I'm talking of, the status value of diabetes in a blood. So can you just guide me on that? Because people always talk, if you take it at a random, if it is 150, you are not seriously diabetic. Please explore.
See, there are 2-3 things basically in it. One is, for the purpose of diagnosis, even a fasting reading of 110 gives you the diagnosis of a person who is bending towards diabetes. Similarly, any postprandial after meals value of more than 160 indicates that yes, you are jumping into that category. Okay? But first trial is always given to lifestyle modification and dietary restriction.
Yes.
And after lifestyle modification, we monitor the every 3 monthly HbA1c. And the targets are nowadays little relaxed, up to 7 HbA1c. We accept it. Okay, fine. We don't want to drop it too drastically because low sugar has its own side effect on brain and on heart. So, okay, fine. But if we find that it is touching 7.5 or 8, then definitely the medicine has to be started. Right? And then it has got to somewhere between 6.5 and 7 in the next 3 months. So one reading should never give us the conclusion that yes, you are on this side of the fence or on the other side of the fence. So
thank you, Doctor.
Multiple readings during the day and 3 monthly average reading, everything put together. But definitely straight away medicine should not be started unless the fasting reading is say 250 or so. Then you have to quickly lower it because if you look at the same day's postprandial value, then it would be touching 350 and 400. So you don't want the organs to be damaged and while giving, trial of medicines. And that lifestyle modification will reduce it by 10% or 20%, and that will not serve your purpose if you want to achieve the ideal value. So there you can start with the medicine straight away. But anything which is 10 to 20% more than the normal range, give advice to the patient to modify his lifestyle, make it healthy, change his eating habits, and then after 3 months you can reassess whether you need to start the treatment or not.
Dr. Corollary, I'm already diabetic. I'm taking medicine. Still, I'm discussing those readings, as I just posed before you. Now, what do you say? I'm already on medicine.
It's fine. You monitor your HbA1c and accordingly modify your dose.
Thank you, doctor.
Not to drop it too drastically, not to let it go to 7.58 or so.
Dr. Jaswal, what is a hard point when you finish your exercise or the apps, the smartphones, you get Fitbit or something. This is my distance you are covered. Hard points is 3, hard point is 4. Golden hard points. What are the which heart earns by virtue of the exercising or taking more oxygen?
It's a scoring system which makes you say that, okay, fine, you have done sufficient exercise for the day.
What's the optimum limit for that one? What should one keep?
See, basically we have to look at for walking about 10,000 steps in a day. And you don't need any other exercise if you do that kind of, exercise. But these systems are not perfect because, if you're doing cycling,
okay,
they may not be very precise in assessment. And if you're doing static exercise, static cycling, then they may underestimate that. Okay. So
the average as a side is. Please clarify this again. Could not get it. Cycling and static cycling.
If you are doing a static cycling exerciser, then the amount of exercise you do is underestimated by these apps.
Okay.
Because they are not looking at the movement. They're looking at the movement of your legs, but not physical movement as far as the forward movement is concerned. So they may make error. If you are walking, they may assess the steps correctly, and even the distance might be correctly assessed. So this is what. And similarly, when you are climbing stairs, the pace at which you are climbing also determines, how much calories you are burning, not just the number of stairs that you are ascending. So that factor is also not taken into account by these apps. At what pace are you doing that exercise? So we have, this is a kind of rough estimate, okay, fine, to remind you that you didn't do enough exercise, you have to compensate for it tomorrow if you couldn't do it today, but not solely depend upon these figures. In the heart of our heart, we know that we have done sufficient exercise, 45 minutes of walk or whatever. And of course, it has to be balanced with less amount of time.
And Dr. Jaswal, not a question, but in a private institution, as you are working, I'm giving the reference about Fortis, how can any private institution, coronary or something, can increase the trust of the patient? So far as trust ratio is concerned, it's very less. In a government hospital, they have the lesser trust because they think that this doctor is neglected. When they go to private institutions, they feel that they are making more money for that. How can you build up more trust vis-a-vis give the best options available to the patients?
Okay, fine. In today's world, there is no question of mistrust. Why do I say that? In medical science, there is only one procedure, which is angioplasty and angiography, which records each and every scene. This is what it was before. This is what happened after Belluni. This is what happened after stent. This is how it is looking now, right? And with the technology which I have told now, you can have FFR values also beyond angiography. Okay, fine. This is not subjective assessment. This is objective assessment that yes, FFR is so critically low that if you do not fix this lesion, it can cause heart attack any day. And then on OCT, you can see the inside of the picture, which are digital images. I have shown you the images also.
Yes.
So where is the trust deficit which comes into mind? No, and that the same recording you can see even after 20 years later, whether it was correctly done or not. So I don't think any doctor can cheat if he has given you the CD and the OCT CD. He cannot cheat even if he wants to do it. That's how I take it. And I can confidently defend what I'm saying. But definitely, you know, people even say, you know, the patient is on ventilator, is he dead? Let me tell you, I have given instructions to my residents that during the patient's attendance visiting hours, don't let the patient be deeply sedated, because every ventilated patient has to be kept in deep sedation and on muscle relaxant, because otherwise he'll fight the tube. So I always tell them that time it accordingly, because this is very hurting to the doctor also when the family asks that, are you minting money or our patient is alive? At least in interventional cardiology, I can vouch that if you have the CD, nobody can deceive you. That's the only documentation.
So we are running, we have few other questions from other Rotarians also, and Mrs. Watts, she wants to ask a question from doctor.
Yes, yes.
I'm Mrs. Watts speaking, doctor.
Right.
You have given me enough and wonderful knowledge of everything. I had a heart attack 9 months ago.
Right.
In spite of having all the, the real formalities, exercise, diet, and taking care of everything, I have got 2 stents, doctor. Still, I would like to ask 3 tips which you can give me about exercise, about the diet, and about my lifestyle. I mean, the remaining life, which how can I lead normally?
See, after a person has undergone a stent procedure, the life that one has to follow comes under the aftercare. Aftercare has 3 components. And if you do perfect aftercare, the chances of landing up with a problem or recurrence again are reduced by as much as 45 to 50%. So after a stent, we should not forget that, okay, fine, it is open, now forget it. I know you would not do it, but I'm still reasserting, 3 things are, I specifically did not discuss the drug part. So basic 4 drugs which your cardiologist has advised you, you must religiously take it.
I'm already on Brilinta.
Yeah.
And
for 1 year Brilinta, and then afterwards it can be reduced also. So religiously take all the medicines. 1, regular follow-up and investigation to look for any side effects of the drugs or anything happening beyond common symptoms. So there is a set investigations for follow-up which are advised internationally, and a very good meticulous follow-up is something which is very important. And most commonly we have seen that after the stent have been deployed, the patient loses interest, the doctor loses interest. Everybody starts taking things casually, and I have been deploying stents for 25 years. I have seen many patients, they come from 1 heart attack to the 2nd heart attack. 10 years down the line, when they have the 2nd heart attack, then they contact the doctor. Otherwise, they keep taking medicines because they feel that there are no symptoms. And of course, the role of 3rd part, which is lifestyle modification, is most important. So that is what we discussed in the prevention of heart disease. But I'll just repeat few tips for you. 1 tip is keep an ideal weight. Ideal weight is your height in centimeters minus 100 is ideal weight. Right? Try to keep your waist circumference close to 32 inches at the level of umbilicus. Avoid central obesity.
Okay,
Regular exercise, moderate intensity exercise, not very strenuous. I don't want your joints to suffer, because I as a cardiologist, I want you to do a lot of exercise. So moderate intensity.
When should I feel ki now I should stop the exercise? Means when my heart rate increases or what?
See, as far as heart rate is concerned, all cardiologists, they give some beta blockers also to prevent the second attack. So heart rate never goes beyond a level, right? So if you feel short of breath while doing your maintenance exercise, or your joints start paining, or you feel fatigue, you don't have to overstretch yourself. And low calorie, healthy, fat-free diet is most important. And as I said, stress management by exercise, yoga, meditation, devotional music, classical music, caring and sharing. Don't keep things to yourself. And 5 minutes of laughter. These are the 4 things which I told for stress management.
Very
So
nice,
practice
doctor.
and have a good life.
Perfect. Thank you so much, doctor. Perfect tips. Perfect tips.
Very nice tips, doctor. Very practical tips. So our Rotarian VGS Vora also wants to have ask a question.
Yeah, sure.
Rotarian Vora, sir.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Absolutely clear. Yeah.
Dr. Jaiswal, your presentation has been very colorful and very. My question is that most of us in our Rotary Club, I think our average age would be about 60.
Right.
And everybody will be age of our members is, I think, must be between 55 and 60.
Right.
And most of us at this age, disease or the other. My question is that you've given very good tips. If one is cautious about his health within the limits, but I find that some people are overcautious about their health. They keep on worrying. Well, I'm a blood pressure, hypertension case, and I keep thinking about my hypertension. I have my set with me to check my blood, not do it every day, and I should do whatever advices. But some of us making इसको बहुत ही religiously follow करो, बिल्कुल हटना नहीं है, ये नहीं है. I know some people doing exercise or playing golf, they overplay it and they have a heart attack there only. So what is your opinion? One should be normal or one should be overconscious?
No, everything in moderation. Extreme of everything is bad. So when I talked about exercise also,
yes,
I talked about, 30 to 45 minutes of isotonic, moderate intensity exercise 5 to 7 days a week. More than that, not only makes you overstrain yourself, but it also causes skeletal and muscle system abnormalities because you're torturing your joints to beyond the limit. So similarly,
the other question I want to ask between difference between having vegetarian and non-vegetarian. What do you recommend? Which is better, non-vegetarian or vegetarian, or
as long as you keep the high saturated fat vegetarian and non-vegetarian diet out of your schedule. Say if you are taking non-vegetarian, avoid red meats, avoid yellow of egg. If you take 2 whites of egg, or you take roasted white meat, say 150 grams twice a week, it's perfect. If you take butter chicken, then definitely you're adding saturated fats to it. Or similarly, fried chicken would be spoiling the very intent of white meat. Similarly, in vegetarian diet, if you keep your dairy consumption, which is milk, to about 450 to 500 ml, double skimmed milk, right? So you are not taking unnecessary saturated fats and you are taking the other nutrients also. So that is how you have to modify, whether it is vegetarian or non-vegetarian. You have to take good things in vegetarian diet if you are vegetarian and good things in non-vegetarian diet if you are non-vegetarian.
Okay. So doctor, we have a question from one of our audience in chat box. wants to know about the consumption of coffee while having hypertension.
For hypertensives, it should be avoided. This is a caffeine stimulant, causes tachycardia. It can increase, blood pressure also. But say one odd coffee, which is not very strong, is fine, 1 or 2 cups, because it has antioxidants also. But if you take, very strong coffee, more than 4 to 5 cups a day, then it is not recommended. It's a double-edged weapon. So
Right.
1 cup, 2 cups, small, which is light, is perfectly fine. No issues with that.
You said hot, sir? Hot makes it more...
No, not hot. Strong.
No, strong is...
Concentration.
So there is another question in the chat box. Mr. Ashish is asking through chat box only that he had episode of sinus tachycardia after 7 years and his heart rate 134 BPM ECG. ECG was okay and doctor put him Ciplar 20 CR for 4 weeks. Is this something serious diagnosis? Was anxiety induced palpitations? So
it is not a serious problem at all. Sinus tachycardia is a physiological response. If you are too sensitive, it can go to that level. Only thing that you have to rule out is the thyroid disease, which sometimes leads to tachycardia. And thyrotoxicosis has presentation similar to anxiety. So as such, sinus tachycardia is supposed to be a physiological response, which can be a physical stress sometimes, which can be mental stress, or some people are too sensitive. So with little stress, their heart may start pounding. So it's not a serious problem. But if it is disturbing you, if it is causing you too much of discomfort, then one can be on low dose of beta blockers. But as such, a person who does regular exercise and stress management, his heart rate remains low. There is a definite term called athlete's heart. Those people who do a good amount of exercise, their basal heart rate is always close to 50, 60. So deconditioning is another thing which increases your basal heart rate. But sinus tachycardia is a physiological variant. It's never a serious problem.
thank you. So I think that brings to the end of session of our Q&A because we are running out of time also. Thank you everyone for being a wonderful audience. I will say, दिल से दिल के बारे में दिल से कही गई बात आज सब ने दिल से सुनी. Thank you, Dr. Saab, for giving us your time. I came to know that you were very busy in cath lab and
up in the cath lab with a tough case. So
so
that's the problem. I just rushed home and started off. I'm very sorry for you to be,
No, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Waiting, So, but many times doctors are delayed; they are not late. So that's how you get stuck up.
No, Doctor, you were still in time, so it's okay, Doctor. Thank you very much for giving us your time, and with a heart filled with gratitudes, I wish health and safety for everyone. I hereby invite Rotarian J.S. Baba to provide vote of thanks. Over to you, Baba sir.
Good evening, everybody. Honorable President, Rotarian Sanjay Bhatia, Secretary Suchi Thakur, fellow Rotarians. I am thankful to Dr. Saab for giving such a knowledgeable presentation and to enlighten us of the various heart diseases which are inviting in our life, and the prevention we should take to avoid this. And the takeaway from today's presentation is, as wonderfully covered by you, that heart diseases are by choice, and our choice is to prevent it. So this is a wonderful thing which you have told us today, and we must take this as a takeaway, and we must maintain our lifestyle, our balanced diet, exercise, regular exercise. And to share with you, I
lost about 25 kgs of weight when I came back home. And it has really done wonders to me. And as you have rightly pointed out, the diet which I am maintaining now has helped me to reduce the weight. And I am feeling very, comfortable, very light, and life is enjoyable. Thank you very much, sir. We had a very good session with you today, and it has enlightened us and it has increased our knowledge about heart diseases. Thank you very much.
Most welcome.
Now I would call upon President of our club, Rotarian Sanjay Bhatia, to present his concluding remarks. Over to you, Sanjay sir.
Anupamji, my thanks to you for coordinating this meet, and Dr. Jaswalji, when you don't keep a time limit, I think that's one of the best things for us. Though when your session started, this looked technical, but then you moved us to Egypt, to the Bhagavad Gita, to yoga. I'm sure a lot of people who may be doing meditation may not have realized the benefits they're getting unless you till you pointed it out today. And this has been absolutely enlightening for us, and this would definitely go a long way in keeping ourselves healthy. You must have realized that members did have serious queries, and I'm sure they are going to have a much better life ahead. And thank you so much for being so patient and giving us a very detailed analysis of your findings and the even the videos that you were showing to us. There would be many ways that we would like to remain connected. So I would be discussing this with you in a day or two. I understand this probably would be the first time that Rotary Chandigarh Midtown is interacting with you.
Right.
So we would definitely like to see a stronger association with you in future.
Right. We are organizing, regularly I'm organizing, teaching programs, lifestyle and heart disease related patient education program every year.
Right, sir.
Unfortunately, this year we couldn't do it because of Corona. The last program we had was on 26th of November 2019.
I see.
So we had already done about 8 programs like that, and we'll stay in touch, and maybe whenever the conditions allow and we have another program, we'll call you all for that program. And people are really benefited with that educative interactive program, full 4 hours program which we do.
Very nice. Please let us know, please.
Yeah, sure, sir. Sure, sir.
So thank you so much. Anupamji, you have anything else to add? Otherwise, I'll take this meeting forward then.
Sanjay sir, it's over from my side, so you can continue as per.
Okay, thank you very much, Anupamji, and thank you very much, Dr. Jaswal.
Rotary Purnima and Deepa Sood sir on 24 January, shared by Rotarian Sarita and Rotarian PK Vasudeva. We have the anniversaries of Rotarian Monica and Chitranjan Agarwal on 25th Jan. And 28th January, we have the anniversary of Rotarian Pushpa and Rotarian Java sir. I think Java sir is here with us. Is he? Yes. Java sir, please unmute yourself. And many congratulations.
Good evening. Thank you.
Many congratulations, sir, on behalf of the club.
Thank you.
And back to you, President Sanjay.
Thank you, Shuchi. I do see we've had some members leaving a little early, but congratulations to all the couples who are celebrating their anniversary this week. And just a request to all to please log in tomorrow. I think Rita also came gone a little beyond time, but I think it was beneficial for all of us, and especially for Shaju sir. I think his question on coconut oil was relevant, but I'm sure he will carry substitutes from here. So with this, I adjourn today's meeting.